an undergraduate on different things in nutrition, genetics, the whole nine yards, and then eventually started bodybuilding, started competing, getting really into it, and then started graduate school. So I'm currently pursuing my graduate school degrees, a doctorate in PT, and then a PhD in physiology. The main thing that I um our sport of bodybuilding is not a healthy one. It's one that is very stressful on the body in many regards. But what I try to do is if you want to pursue the sport in the safest manner you can, then you want to come to me. That's the goal that in the reputation that I want to create. So I do blood work analysis every 12 weeks with my clients that are pursuing that sport that want to have someone looking over their shoulder. I do biomechanics feedback, training analysis, training design, nutrition, all your micronutrients, the whole nine yards, A to Z. Uh, I got here from a lot of personal research and a lot of trial and error. I'm on the younger side of 23, so I'm not going to pretend to be the be all know all, but I've been locked in my room for many years researching this stuff more than you can imagine. There's probably close to 6,300 citations on my computer files. So, um, that's a little bit about my background. So, what I have to do here now basically is every Sunday is when I usually have free time. So we organize it with Ayo. So we're going to have an Ask Me Anything session one by one. And then we'll do some free form stuff at the end. Last time we did some common myth busting, fitness myths that are continued to be passed down. But I'm going to turn it over to you guys for questions. So anything you guys have from A to Z on training, nutrition, diet, health, blood work, A to Z, go ahead and ask, and we'll dive into these topics one by one. And again, even if you may not have something now for me, just stay in and be attentive and listen, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect.
All
I
right.
could have not said that
So
better. So the first person is probably Nadia. What I'm going to say is, anybody, if you do have your mic, make sure to raise your hands. And this way I'll be able to see the amount of requests so everybody can ask a question at the same time. You can ask multiple questions if you want, or you can use the chat, which for anybody who can't access the chat, it's at the very top right of the the stage or whatever this is called. And post your questions there. Mention either Doc or myself, and also or DM Doc if you're struggling to find that as well. And yeah, the floor is yours. Let's go.
yeah, so we have a couple questions here in the chat. I think the chat is easier, but if you want to use the voice note, if you may want to clarify a question a little bit better and you find you can speak it out better, then use that. But here we have, is there anything better? Is there anything that is better than other things to eat when training arms? Now, nutrition is kind of stable across the board, right? So if your goal is to grow tissue, now you can argue if you're a beginner that you may be able to build a little bit of tissue in a deficit, just simply because that stimulus is so new and such a shock to the body in a sense, because all we really do when we train is we're adding stress. So we're stressing the tissue breaks down, and it sends chemical messengers to repair itself bigger and stronger than before to ensure that we can now handle that stress in the future. It's a survival mechanism, purely. If there's not typically an abundance of nutrients or some excess left over, you're not really going to have the ability to add that new tissue. But if you're very new to this, having enough protein intake and having all of the things that drive muscle growth, even if there's a slight energy deficit, we do see a little bit of skeletal muscle growth. But if you're any bit experienced in this, it's really not going to be an effective strategy. I tell people to focus on one thing at a time typically. So if you want to eat and grow big arms, it's going to look the same if you want to eat and grow anything else. Just have a steady stream of good protein sources, have a little bit of an energy excess that you can control across the week, and train your arms like they owe you fucking money. Just train your ass off. The topic is anything holding A to Z. First question: how can we train without needing any motivation? Um, this is a big one, man. There's a difference between motivation and discipline and drive. I find that most people who are in the scene sometimes fluctuate with how much they adhere. And again, like I'm at a point now where I would rather die than not eat my meals and not be on point. But again, I'm 4 weeks away from a bodybuilding show. I'm 4 weeks out right now. I'll be on stage in literally a month. So there's no room for error. If I don't win every day, then I'm not going to be in shape by the time I get on stage. So that's just a matter of, for some people, I recommend having a coach. I find that when most guys hire me, when they're now paying somebody to now invest in them and write their plans or like watch over what they're doing, not only do they not want to let themselves down internally, but I find that now that there's a monetary value, one, they don't want to waste their money that they're paying somebody to make their program for, but two, they don't want to let that other person down because we're going to know if you fell short. We're not, a lot of us aren't stupid. We know when people aren't adhering. So that could be a strategy. Maybe have someone, even if you're not paying them, just have someone, hey man, can you take a look at my program and help me out? Have someone overseeing what you're doing, because then at that point you have that external motivator to not, to one, try to impress that person, but to also not let them or yourself down. Another thing would be, if you're in this long enough and you're consistent, once you see how your body changes, man, you're going to get addicted. And there's going to come a point where your mindset begins to shift where you're like, I know if I do everything I need to do today, I'm going to look better. And I'm seeing how far I've already come. And if I miss, like, you're going to hate yourself that next day that you didn't get that cardio done, that you didn't get all those meals in, that you didn't train hard that day. You're going to start to really feel that guilt carry over day to day. And that's no fun, man. It's going to kill you. So I think that's just the biggest thing, man. Stay consistent or have someone oversee you, and it'll kick your ass into gear. Just have someone in your corner that's going to be honest with you. You don't pay a coach to be your friend. You pay him to elevate you. So sometimes we don't always talk nice to our clients, but we tell you what you need to hear.
Hey, Doc, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Nice. Hey, yeah, thanks for the introduction so far and for doing this event, guys. My question is about nutrition. Just a bit of background. I think I would be considered skinny fat. I've always been of a small posture. My family
Hmm.
also is, honestly, it's just runs in the genetics. And I started getting into, reading a bit about, calisthenics and lifting at home. And my question about nutrition, whether I, as a skinny fat so-called, should have a calorie deficit, or eating more calories than I should be. So what should be the main focus right now, building when building muscle and trying to lose fat at the same time?
Ooh, yeah. So that's a good question. So I feel like it's tough, man. One is age, obviously, depending on how old you are, you may have a difference in like what your strategy might be. I never advise heavily cutting for somebody that's a teenager going through, key stages of development if you can help it. If you're morbidly obese or like you have guys that are very overweight, I always tell those people like, yes, that there are some potential risks that are there for developmental purposes if you're in an energy deficit, but at the same time, like what is fat? It's stored energy. I don't think there's a lot of physiologic harm that'll take place if you're in a calorie deficit trying to lose a lot of excess body weight as a teenager, if you have serious health concerns along with that, because I feel like staying at a very high body fat is going to be more encumbersome than obviously doing a little bit of a cut health wise in the long term. But not to get sidetracked here, but my general advice is if you want to build tissue effectively, you need to be insulin sensitive, meaning like insulin resistance won't hold you from losing weight, but insulin resistance will stop the efficiency of your nutrient partitioning, meaning where the nutrients actually go. When insulin is functioning properly and you are sensitive to it, it is a transporter molecule. It'll help transport the nutrients you're taking in to the right places and where you want them to go. Once you get past that 17 to 18% body fat mark, we start to accumulate what's called visceral fat, or fat around the organ tissue, which can really make us very insulin resistant, which is not going to help us grow effectively. The leaner you are when you start, one, the more runway you have to add muscle, because the more fat you can put on, the longer you can stay in an energy excess. But two, the more efficient your nutrient partitioning will be to those muscle fibers and cells, to those androgen receptors, so they can undergo transcription and build some muscle. So ideally, you'd want to be lean first, and then start to add tissue. But if you're already skinny fat and you're going to have to bury yourself into a hole to get down to that lean body fat range, I would eat around your maintenance calories, whatever that may be. Find a level of food that keeps your body weight relatively stable, and then try to just increase that deficit with a little bit of movement. Try to keep food as high as you can and create the deficit with increasing maybe your steps. Maybe you do a 10-minute walk after meals. Maybe you do a little bit of cardio post workout, just something to drive that amount of energy in your net for the day to be in a deficit, but keeping the food as high as you can, right? Because the more protein you have in, the more carbohydrates you have in, the more of the nutrients you're able to bring into your body, but still remain in a deficit, the harder you'll be able to train and the more protein you'll have around for muscle protein synthesis if it can take place in that deficit. Again, if you're newer to this, there's a higher chance it will, but as long as you keep food as high as you can and move to create that net deficit, you're in a good spot. I think that's probably the best strategy.
Gotcha. So I'm currently eating around 500 calories less than my maintenance, and I'm eating around 2 times my body weight in kilograms of protein. So that's around
What I
120
would
or
do is I would just
130.
make up that 500 and then I would just add like a 10-minute walk after each meal. There's an extra, if you have 4 or 5 meals, there's an extra 4 to 5 thousand steps. That's going to drive around that 250, 300 calorie deficit anyway. You accumulate that over a summative amount of like maybe 3, 4 months, you'll see some good changes.
Gotcha. So just to summarize, you mean first lose fat and then gain weight again and go into bulking?
I mean, for most people, for your context, again, I would eat a little bit below maintenance, but creating the deficit with movement. So increasing your step count, increasing your cardio. I'd
Yeah.
add back that 500 you subtracted, and I would eat around your maintenance. And then I would add a little bit of activity to create a new deficit that's a little bit maybe lower, but has a higher food content. Because the more food you have in, the more you'll be able to train effectively, the more you'll be able to build tissue effectively.
Got you. All right. Thank you.
Yep. So we'll go to the next one here. How do I stop the habit of being scared of calories for cutting? Just tracking them, man. If you know where your caloric goal is supposed to be at, and you know that your food is weighed out as much as it should be in grams, and you know what metrics you have to hit as far as activity and as far as food intake, you shouldn't be scared to be on plan. If you're on the money, you're on the money, and that should bring you less and less anxiety. The anxiety really comes from the unknown of not knowing how much is this, or you're guesstimating. It takes 10 seconds, man. Pop it on a scale. You get a food scale on Amazon for $15. Call it a day. How does one optimize testosterone? Please give suggestions regarding sleep, schedule, routine, diet, anything else that people tend to get wrong. So this is a big one, man. I think a lot of people fail to realize that blood work is a blood work, or people seeing their testosterone, is essentially a screenshot of like that exact millisecond in time when that blood was drawn. That's where serum testosterone was at. Testosterone fluctuates, man. It spikes in the morning in response to temperature increase when we wake up with cortisol. It takes a dip in the afternoon. It may rise slightly again before the evening hours for other physiologic functions. It's a pendulum that's going back and forth. I think people get too hung up on the total number, like that's going to perfectly correlate with how much muscle you're going to be able to put on. So there's so many factors that affect tissue growth. One of which is androgen receptor density, meaning like how many androgen receptors do you have lying around? If you have a higher concentration of them, there's more receptors, there's more opportunities for growth. How much myostatin does this individual have in their circulation, right? Myostatin, or growth, or GDF8, it's a growth factor, regulates skeletal muscle growth. It tells the body, if it doesn't deem it to be feasible, hey, let's not add this tissue right now. We don't need to do that. Some people have a genetic variance in how much myostatin they have, and people with more will have more inhibition of that signaling. Now, this is a little bit nuanced, but again, we have differences in muscle fibers. If someone has a higher density of type 2 muscle fibers that are more responsible for explosive movements and high velocity things, as far as like weight training and resistance training, they're going to appear to put on muscle faster. So there's a lot of factors that determine muscle growth outside of testosterone that you have to remember. And you also have to remember that 95% of testosterone is bound up as it is. So just because your total level may rise, it doesn't mean that you're just going to put on more muscle now. And because of those other factors, like I talked about, you can have somebody with a level of 400 and somebody else with a level of 600. It doesn't mean the guy with 600 is going to build more muscle than the guy with 400. There's so many factors at play. But as far as optimizing your hormones, it's going to be just sleeping, having a good micronutrient balance within your diet, lots of fruits, green leafy vegetables within 2 to 3 meals, and just providing the stimulus of exercise and living a healthy lifestyle. These supplements like ashwagandha, lion's mane, Tunga Ali, like, yes, they see serum concentration increases in literature, but these transient or short-term increases in the amount of serum testosterone is not going to correlate to anything tangible that you're going to reap down the line. I mean, it's just, there's nothing about these herbs or supplements that impress me for what they have to offer in that regard. If you want to optimize where you're at, have at least a 10 to 15% dietary intake of fats, sleep 7 to 9 hours a day, have all your micronutrients in check with fruits and vegetables, and train your ass off. That's your answer. Um, go to
What's up, guys? How are you?
what's going on, man? Go ahead and shoot.
All right. Question for you. I'd imagine you've been training for many years, but puts a significant amount of stress on your joints at one point in time, right? Have you ever had any joint problems? Example, in your elbows or knees or what have you?
Oh yeah. Definitely from A to Z, but here's the thing, man. A lot of those issues come with, I would say, more contextual factors that are related to the training rather than the training itself. Not being hydrated enough, not sleeping well enough, lifting like an idiot, being egotistical with how I approach the training and how I'm executing the movements. Those really are where I find the issues. So, and the other thing is just getting lackadaisical with my mobility, but also a big thing that people don't realize is, let's say, for example, right? You have some issues within the elbow joint. A lot of people that I see with problems with joints is, let's say, for example, they're going to do a bench press, right? And I put them on an incline bench, and I have them bring the bar down as far as they can. With their current mobility in their shoulders and their elbow, they can only bring the bar down to about an inch off of their chest, let's just say, for all intensive purposes. I've seen this many times. But now they add 135 on, and where's the bar go? It slams down onto their chest. So they're allowing external load to bring them into new ranges of motion that they can't complete on their own. That's like one of the big examples I see where things start to get irritated, because now you're letting resistance put you into ranges that you on your own are not really capable of with the current arthrokinematics of your joint and what it's able to complete successfully and effectively. So those things I would definitely say, yeah, are the biggest thing. But do you have any other follow up related to that, or you're just asking my personal experience?
No, long story short, I mean, I've been training for, oh my God, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 years maybe. Long time. I've been fairly active all my life. I mean, I played soccer for 17 years. Anyways, long story short, I've been noticing recently, only in the past, I don't want to say 8 months, a little bit more joint sensitivity in both of my elbows. Really, when I do any tricep extensions of any sort, really. The bench press, not so much. I do feel a little something in the joint, so I've been taking some what do they call it? Glucosamine, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen any really big difference. I've been taking it for about 3 months now.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, it's not an excruciating pain. Some days are worse than others, like a little bit more tenderness on the joint. But
Mm-hmm.
did you have any I don't know, type of remedy that maybe I could give a shot? Maybe
Say what
try out.
joints again are the biggest problem? Which side?
So my elbows, on my left elbow's worse than my right, but I mean my right's pretty sensitive from time to time as well. But it's not like every day. It's only say 2 days of the week. It's really bad.
Okay. I would one, I would have to look at the way you're executing the movements. But two, I could recommend omega-3 fish oil and curcumin. Those might help. Those actually have clinical evidence as far as their effects on joints, inflammatory joint spaces. So definitely omega-3 fish oils, 2 to 3 grams of EPA/DHA every day, and then curcumin. And then the other thing would be, maybe you have to swap out that movement or look at how you're executing it and try to, see if there's anything that's putting that joint at risk or under stress, depending upon the angle and how you're executing it. Okay,
Right. All
Nugget.
right.
Let's see here. I'm 14, training 6 times a week, working with the Arnold split. My question is 6 days a week too much stress on the muscles for my age? And would you recommend anything as far as me taking supplements? I, Look, man, I mean, there's a component to this that has to come down to enjoyment. If you enjoy training with the Arnold split and you find yourself recovering from the sessions optimally, then I don't really have an issue with it. But I'm not going to go ahead and say that's the most effective strategy for a beginner. Most beginners, I would have just do a rotation of upper body, lower body, 4 out of 7 days of the week. So they upper, lower, rest, and then they start the next week. After 2 subsequent rest days on the last rotation. I think the 4 out of 7 days for them with an upper lower split is more than enough, especially if they're training with decent intensity. Um, Again, it's it's a little bit nuanced, but you don't need to spend an hour on pushing muscle groups if training is a novel stimulus to you. You're going to get enough out of it if you're training effectively with enough intensity with just grouping those muscles together for now. But as far as supplements, man, the only thing I'd really recommend to you is vitamin D3. Almost everybody in the Northern Hemisphere and that I've pulled lab work from so many clients, every single one of them. When we do a vitamin D 25 hydroxy blood test, their vitamin D is low. Even if they get a lot of sun or they work construction, and vitamin D not only is responsible for mood and energy and other things, but it also plays a big role in the contractile force of muscles. And that's a hidden role that not a lot of people know. So definitely 5,000 IUs of vitamin D, I would say is across the board for everybody very helpful. Other supplements, man, if you want to, if you're better consistent with me than me, is creatine. Creatine monohydrate at 5 grams daily is perfectly safe and fine for an adolescent, and it'll help you. It'll help build results. It'll help intracellular water activity. It'll help with creating more ATP through free radical phosphates and energy for the gym. It's only net benefits. It's the most researched supplement in the world. It's perfectly safe. So those would be the two things I'd recommend. Let's see if I miss any other ones from the top here. How much rest does the body actually need, and how to find the most optimal amount of rest for myself? I love going to the gym, going 5 to 6 times a week, push-pull legs, trying to train harder than last time, but I see so many natty bodybuilders lately going back to 3 to 4 days resting more, and I feel like I'm doing it wrong. I mean, you could do a 6-day-a-week split, man. I mean, just gauge it by your activity, right? So, let's say, for example, you train push on a Monday. Your next push day is going to be on that Thursday, right? If you're still sore from Monday's push session lingering into Thursday, well, then, man, you're probably doing too much. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to 4 days a week of training. It could just mean that you have to reduce your volume on Monday's push. So play around with it. Your volume and your intensity are going to dictate how much recovery capacity you need. So if you're finding yourself sore for 3 to 4 days and that soreness is carrying over into the subsequent session of the same body part and it's hindering your ability to perform on that Thursday session, then you got to scale it back. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the amount of frequency and setup you have for your split. If you can recover from it, that's all that matters. I train certain body parts 3 days a week. I train side delts and I train calves 3 days a week. But I'm recovering from those sessions. I'm able to perform at my best within those 3 days a week. So it just depends on how you're able to recover from it and how you have it broken up with your volume and your intensity. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to scale back to 5 days a week. I personally prefer 5 days a week of training. Um, but you can do 6 days. Your volume intensity just has to reflect the fact that you're introducing everything at that type of frequency. Will it take more time to build muscle with calisthenics? Yes, it will. It's just not the same amount of stimulus as external loading. Did I understand correctly that this isn't a one-off event? Yeah, we're going to do this every Sunday. What is the maximum amount of eggs you would recommend per day? It's a staple for most on a budget, but I think most EDU resources recommend 1 to 2 a day at most. No, eggs are fine, man. You know, you can look at the Framingham study and others. If you really understand the literature, we don't really see a dietary intake of HDL cholesterol start to influence total cholesterol levels to a significant degree. And again, cholesterol isn't even really the number one predictor of cardiomyopathy or heart disease or heart attack. It's mainly A lipoprotein B, ApoB, that is the main predictor of cardiac events now that we're finding out. But dietary cholesterol, a lot of the times, is hereditary and often genetic in its influence. And we don't really see too much of an influence with food on it, as far as foods that contain cholesterol like eggs. I haven't seen a lot of convincing literature that tells me my egg intake is going to skyrocket my cholesterol. Now, does that mean you eat 12 of them? No. But just understand that, like, it's not this inherently dangerous food that people make it out to be. So if you want to have 4 or 5 and you find it to be a cost-effective option in the morning, go ahead, dude. I don't see any issues with it. None of the literature really steers me away from it at all. The only thing that people don't understand with eggs is how to assess the quality of an egg. It, a lot of people like to look at the color of the yolk. Oh, if it's this nice, mango orange or sunny yellow, it's a healthy egg. The yolk color has nothing to do with the quality of an egg. The yolk's color is purely a result of the chicken's diet when it's in the farm. There are certain fat-soluble dyes that are contained within foods that alter the yolk color of a chicken's egg. One of them is xanthophyll, which is found in marigold seeds, which is composed of the diet of certain companies that feed their chicken marigold seeds. So their yolk is going to come out like a more orange tinted color. We've done experiments in biochemistry where we've turned egg yolk colors into black, blue, green, yellow. You can even make them rainbow and layered, depending on what fat-soluble dyes you introduce into the diet of the chicken. So the yolk color means nothing, okay? If you want to assess the quality of the eggs that you've bought, you want to assess how well the yolk of the egg sits on top of the egg white. So if you've ever cracked open an egg and that yolk takes off running like a slip and slide right off the egg white and slides down the pan, that's a pretty shitty egg. But if the egg yolk sits on top of a thick layer of egg white and it doesn't move much, and you can clearly see a space in between the bottom of the yolk and the bottom of your skillet or pan, then you know that egg is fresh. How do I approach cardio when bulking? I'm skinny, but I've heard that cardio is important during a bulking phase. Yeah, cardio is important year round, man. The thing is, like, a lot of guys that hire me, they don't realize because they don't do cardio effectively at all in the off season. A lot of these guys that come to me, man, they're so poor in their cardiovascular fitness that becomes the limiting factor in training rather than muscle output. For example, like they're doing a heavy set of barbell squats and they're so fucking winded that is the reason that they have to stop the set before their legs are actually tired enough, because you'll start to feel more lactic acid buildup and overall perceive yourself to be closer to failure sooner if you don't have that aerobic capacity to, like, really take in the cardiovascular aspect of training to a high degree. So I have cardio in year round for my guys, even in the off season. And you'll find that you are way stronger as a result of that because you're less relying on the fact that you don't have any cardiovascular output to train hard. I mean, it's just that's going to have to coincide with that. So as far as cardio year round or cardio and bulking, I would at least want 100 minutes a week. Break that up however you want. Most guidelines say 150 minutes a week, but you know, I understand the realistic expectation that most of you are pretty lazy when it comes to cardio. So if you can get at least 100 minutes in a week, I'm happy with that. And the way you approach it with bulking is if you know that I eat the same level of calories every week, and every week I have 4 sessions of cardio at X amount of minutes, and across the week I lost a pound, well, then I have to increase my amount of food, right? So as long as you keep everything consistent, you'll know how much more you have to eat in terms of now that you have increased activity. So what I like to do is I weigh myself every morning, and at the end of the week, I take the average of the weigh-ins for the week. So if I weigh myself for 7 days, every morning fasted, I add all the numbers up and I divide by 7 to get my average body weight for the week. Because again, if you have more water intake one day or you have a little bit more sodium before you go to bed, you may have a little bit of fluctuations in body weight. But if you track the average changes week to week to week, then you're really in a good spot to know how your body is actually changing. And if your average weekly body weight starts to fluctuate or trend downwards, then you know with that cardio you introduced, you have to introduce more food, which is never a bad thing. You know, the more food you have, the more carbohydrates you get to consume, the more protein you get to consume, the more you can fuel those workouts and fuel muscle protein synthesis. So as long as you keep everything consistent with your food intake and your activity levels, it shouldn't really be trivial to figure out like, oh, what do I do now in response? Your body will tell you. Do thermogenics help you lose weight? Not really. Caffeine and other ones, like, yeah, sure, they have a thermogenic effect, but a lot of those supplements, man, those fat burning supplements are just a waste of your fucking money. I wouldn't even bother. I've never seen anything impressive in any clinical literature that has to do with fat burners and thermogenics. Fish oil and curcumin. I'll type it here for you, Angela. Okay. I'm currently 6'2" and 160 skinny fat. I want to bulk to 185, but be as lean as possible. Should I bulk then cut? Lean bulk. Like I said, for him, man, I would eat around your maintenance level of calories, and then just create a small deficit with movement. So in a sense, I would, let's say your maintenance level of calories is 2,700, for example. I'm going to put you at about 2,700 calories, and then I'm going to have you increase your step count or maybe add, 20 minutes of cardio 3 times a week just to make the net amount of energy you're intaking a deficit. So we start to pull some fat, but we have enough food in our system to potentially substantiate muscle growth because we have so much protein within the system. We have enough available for muscle protein synthesis to take place if it can. How to properly bulk slash cut? When should I start or finish? How long term should I be imagining a single bulk slash cut phase? Just as a general guideline. Okay, good question. So this is a big one, man. Protein accretion takes time. Building muscle takes a lot of time. You're talking about adding more human to your frame. It's not a quick process. It's slow. And it's one of those things where the longer you can drag out a phase, the more effective it's going to be. So for example, if I'm going to bulk, first thing I'm going to do is make sure I'm in a place to where it makes sense for me to bulk. If I'm at a high body fat, my nutrient partitioning is going to be terrible. So there's no sense in me trying to add tissue at that point because I'm not going to, really utilize the nutrients I'm taking in effectively. So I like to start a bulk phase when a client is relatively lean because one, the leaner I am, the more runway I have to add fat before I have to stop and then, maybe do a mini cut to recomp and regain some insulin sensitivity. So the earlier or the leaner I start my bulking phase, the longer it can be, which is critical. Now, again, here we are with the timeline. So again, this protein accretion process takes a lot of time. So if you can control your food very precisely to where you have just a little bit of excess food each day, every day now you have that slight excess energy to go towards whatever systems or functions, whether it be to store it as fat as an adipocyte, or whether it be to build muscle with muscle protein synthesis, that energy is available and it's there. A lot of people they diet all week and they have this big cheat meal at the end of the week, so they just have one huge day of fat storage, and then they have 3 to 4 days where they probably have to eat around maintenance as it is to negate what they did. Now across the week they had maybe 1 to 2 days of ending the day in a good spot of a slight energy excess to where their body was able to put on muscle and then not have all this fat storage that coincides with it. Now, if you add that up where you have a slight surplus for months and months and months, man, that's going to equate to a lot more muscle growth than this huge spike in calorie intake, a slight dip, then this huge spike, with these off-planned meals and stuff like that. So I would have your bulking phase as long as humanly possible. I would aim to gain around half a pound to 0.75 pounds per week on average, slightly increasing your food intake and over time, because eventually you're going to hit some walls. And then once you get to a point where you're at that 16-17% range for body fat and body composition is slowly starting to climb up, your training isn't improving much, maybe you're taking measurements and your waist size is just increasing and the rest of your body parts are not increasing. A big one is measurements, man. I love to take measurements: quads, arms, chest. If I'm seeing an increase in my chest size and my arms and my quads, but I'm not seeing an increase in my waist size all that much, I know I'm in a good spot as far as my food intake. But if I'm gaining this pound, pound and a half a week, I'm going to see a lot of waist changes, not a lot of changes to go with the rest of the body parts. So, as long as you can, with a steady stream of slight excess food, with hard training over time, and a cut phase, that depends on where you're at. If you're coming off a peak bulk where you bulked for 6 months, food is as high as it's ever been. Training is as successful as it's ever been. You're training your ass off. Your food is insanely high. Your output is incredible. This is the perfect state to where muscle retention is the easiest possible scenario. So, because you're in such a good state to retain muscle, because you've been eating more than you ever have, and you're training, harder and stronger than you ever have, that first 6-7 weeks after I've bulked you for 6 months, we can pull down food pretty fucking aggressively. We can cut hard because we have the perfect scenario to where we were not really too concerned about muscle retention at this point because we're coming off our peak. So that mini cut phase, we get pretty aggressive because we're in the perfect state to do so. If you have to diet down for the summer or a contest, I'd want to plan that out for longer. The longer you take, the less aggressive you have to be when you pull down. The longer you drag that process out, just like bulking, the less shitty you're going to feel because you're not burying yourself so early on. But peak bulk, coming right into like maybe a mini cut to regain some insulin sensitivity and to be able to add size again, you can get really fucking hard and aggressive with that. Make that phase super short, but hammer it down. It was a little long-winded there, but it's a complicated topic. Could you is it okay to skip breakfast and just have a coffee in the morning? I'm eating well at lunch and dinner. I mean, if you want to be effective, man, I would have breakfast. What's the sense in waiting to eat? There's nothing really that you stand to gain. You can talk about mTOR signaling. You can talk about all of these things. But if you look at the research on intermittent fasting, you want to know why people lose weight? Because they're ended up eating less. Because now they're just taking all the food that they used to eat and they're just eating it in a smaller window, meaning they're going to end up being less hungry and they typically end up losing weight just simply from a fact of they started to eat less and less food because of how they restricted their window of eating. You can look at the transient increases in growth hormone and testosterone and mTOR signaling and autophagy, all these fancy words that seem great with fasting and all these things. You look at the research, man, it's so fucking unimpressive. It really is. So I don't see the sense, man. Wake up in the morning, you're hungry, have a meal. There's no sense in waiting. Could you please suggest some books or research papers or YouTube channels for beginners like me? I like bodybuilding vocabulary. Alan Argan, I'll type his name in the chat. His books on nutrition are phenomenal. Phenomenal. So if you have anything to go with nutritionally that you want to learn from a baseline perspective, macronutrients, how they work, how signaling works, how you find intake, total daily expenditure, all these things, Alan's resources are incredible. So I definitely recommend Alan's books. That would be like YouTubers, man. Most of them are shit. I honestly just tell people to steer away from that kind of stuff and look at research, look at literature, look at books from people that are experts in the field that have done the research and spent their life looking at these topics. I would always trust them over some schmuck who makes content, to be honest. Let's see if I missed anything here. How many times a year should a regular person get blood work done if they aren't malnourished or any micronutrients? It depends, right? If you're enhanced, obviously there's a need to check up on you more often. But if you're a natural guy and there's no red flags within your hematology panel, within your cholesterol panel, then once a year is plenty. I really don't see a need more than once annually to get blood work done if you don't have any comorbidities, pre-existing conditions, or things that were previously flagged that cause you to have concern. If none of those things are present, once a year is more than enough. I like to work out in the morning before breakfast. Is it okay to do this? I don't. I mean, if you have a bigger meal at night before you go to bed, I mean, it probably wouldn't be a huge issue, but like, I really don't see an effective. I would never, within myself, see training output be anywhere near where I would be without 2 meals within my system already for the day. I will never be as able to output the same amount of intensity and training effectiveness without meals in my system. It just would never happen. Um, if it works for you, it works for you, dude. Fuck it, But would I ever recommend it? No.
Is firstly before we, Doc, do you want to do the myths, um, facts or myths again this
Yeah,
week?
we can
Or
we can ravel off a couple of those, and then I'll go eat my next meal and start training.
perfect. Before we do that, guys, as you can see, Doc is absolutely amazing. 10 out of 10. Perfect member, perfect coach. Please do support him. And yeah, so it's MTO coaching or MTO underscore coaching on all platforms. And I will appreciate, if we give him, the support that he needs, in his journey, in his education, and his, his growth into like being a well-rounded individual. He's also going to be able to support us. And he does also have his paid plans and stuff like that. If you're ever interested in that, feel free to reach out to him privately and speak to him. Thank you all for joining. I really do appreciate it. All of this, so in case you asked a question and you didn't, fully follow it, or really big words were being used, I'm basically a gym bro, so I was hearing a bunch of big words. If you need to rewatch the VOD, just to understand and research further into anything that was talked about, it is going to be on the YouTube and also the Twitch. And yeah, we can go ahead with facts or myths. And if you do want to join the panel, don't be shy. We're all kind of like chill and respectful here. Just raise your hands and I'll add you on. So let me see. Facts or myths. I'll start off with a joke one because we didn't do this last week. Is
Oh
sumo
boy.
deadlifting actually cheating? Because we missed this one, didn't we?
uh, yeah, we didn't do this one. I mean, listen, man, are you gaining a mechanical advantage with how your body's set up within the arthrokinematics of how it moves? Yeah, you are. You're taking advantage of certain leverages in ways that your body can move the weight. Is it cheating? Well, does it say in the rules that you can't do it sumo? No. Well then, no, it's not fucking cheating. It at the end of the day, if they allow you to do it, they allow you to do it. That's up to the federation. But I'm not going to sit here and argue that it's not a mechanical advantage with certain leverages within the joints. It is. I mean, there's a reason that people can sumo deadlift way more than they can from a conventional perspective, just because of the way that the body functions and how it's taking advantage of certain lever arms and leverage. So, yeah, it's going to help more. But your personal prerogative and how you feel about it means little to me. If the rule book says you can do it, well then, I mean, who gives a shit what you think? Because clearly the USAPL or whoever doesn't care. So if that's really how you feel, then start doing it sumo. You know, gain the so-called cheating advantage that you claim it has. Then, to me, it's kind of silly. I don't care about powerlifting. I'm not in that world. I don't pretend to know much about it. I'm not the be all end all, especially in that regard when it comes to designing things. But I do know that the body definitely has mechanical advantages with that movement, for sure.
Perfect. And I think we do have a question from Sorberevis. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yeah. Is there any program do you guys suggest, by the way? The reason I take a break after a year, my knees start to make noises and clicking. I'm going to see a doctor soon. Yeah, man, I'm a PT. Like, joints click and pop, and they have different noises that don't really correlate with pain. Just because your knee's clicking doesn't mean there's pathology there. I really wouldn't be concerned about it. If there's not any exaggerated pain that's elicited from doing those movements and your knees are just popping or clicking, it really doesn't matter. It's totally normal. 76% of most people have some sort of audible noise or clicking within joint spaces, depending upon when they do certain things. I'm not concerned if your knees click. I'm concerned if you have pain that's exacerbated by movement, then obviously that indicates something wrong with the skeletal muscles and joints. But if you're not having pain and it's just making some noise, it's really not a concern, man, to be honest with you.
Okay. I can't think of any myths. I think we covered most of them last week. Are there any that you can think of that we can just go through?
Um, I think the biggest ones, man, is just that, like,
Oh, I've got one. Does sweating prove that you've
okay,
worked harder? That's a good one.
does sweat
Yeah. So
mean that you've worked
whenever
harder?
people are like, work till you sweat, or you've not actually worked out if you're not sweating, because there are some people who don't actually. I'm probably
Of
just
course,
answering it.
Mimi, you can ask a question. Just type it in chat. Um, yeah, I mean, temperature of the room is going to play a factor
Hmm.
here, as well as how much of a, if you just have more of a break in between sets. I mean, if you're lifting sub maximally for a many number of reps, like, you're going to need at least 2 to 3 minutes of rest to perform on the next subsequent, like, straight set,
Hmm.
which 2 to 3 minutes of rest where your heart rate is fluctuating up during that intense set, then coming back down. Are you going to be covered in sweat if the room's cold? Probably not for most people. So if you're not drenched from lifting, doesn't mean that you're not lifting. So no, that's definitely a myth.
Okay. While Mimi's typing a question, another one is, um, the best time to work out is early in the morning. Fact or myth, or your personal take?
I mean, like, there's obviously individual preference here, but like, if you look at literature, I find that most people are probably the most productive, energized, and able to perform in, like, the afternoon from like 12:30 to 2 o'clock. That seems to really be like the area and window of time to where most people are at their functional best, from an energy perspective. Now, I know if you work a 9 to 5, well, what the fuck, that's just shitty advice, right? Again, there has to, be context of that individual and how their schedule works, where they find their ability to train. I find most people late in the evening, it's like, yeah, they can get it in, but I find when I have a client that trains at like 9, 10 o'clock at night, try training at 10 a.m., they're like, whoa, I'm way stronger. And it makes sense because if, the functions that your body has in waking themselves up, as opposed to where you're just about to go to bed soon and you have this huge buildup of adenosine and other functions that are meant to slow your body down and get it prepared to sleep, as opposed to waking up and having everything spiked and everything going towards waking the body up in response to sunlight and activity and getting moving after your temperature just increased that woke you up. So it makes more sense to train in the morning or in the afternoon when, like, your body is physiologically trying to wake yourself up as opposed to trying to get you to go to bed.
Perfect. I
So
think
basically,
Mimi's
like,
asked
four
a
to three years
question.
ago, I did a bad injury to my knee, and the back of it ripped like the tendons, the muscles all messed up, and I didn't have physical therapy even ever after that. So now my basically squats or anything else that makes my knee bend hurts really bad. Is there any type of exercises or type of stretches that I can do which will relieve pain, and I will be capable of doing squat knee related exercises? Yeah, so I'm gonna type in chat the name of a content creator that has bulletproofed my knees and a lot of clients' knees. I use almost all of his practices within my physical therapy programs that I have people go under. Um, it like graded exposure exercise and different stretches are fundamentally just top tier. Because again, muscles and tendons and all those things are just like the muscles that we want to build. You want to build that tolerance and strength over time, exposing them to stress at an increased amount of stress so that they adapt, so that they are able to handle new things and are stronger for it. It's the same thing with tendons and other connective tissue. you have to introduce it to more and more ranges of motion, a little bit more of stress and loading over time. So I'm going to type his name in the chat here. It's Knees Over Toes Guy. His resources are phenomenal when it comes to rehabbing the knee joint. I use a lot of his activities in rehabbing clients of mine who have knee problems with squatting or other knee flexion type movements.
Perfect.
How much does my coaching cost? It depends. It depends on what you want me to do. If you want me to take the reins fully and I'm going over everything, I'm doing your diet, I'm doing your training, I'm doing your supplementation, I'm doing your training footage feedback, the whole nine. That is anywhere from $200 to $250 a month. If I'm just handling your diet or I'm just handling your training, it's going to be about $125 a month. But with both of those things, you're going to talk to me every week. We're going to have check-ins weekly via WhatsApp. You're going to send me photos, and you're going to have a check-in chart that I have you fill out of like your sleep, your water intake, your diet, any life stresses. So I know I I have a very detailed check-in charting that's very easy to follow and input, but tells me a lot as far as was there anything other than the plan itself that could have influenced our results. If there is, I'm going to attack that and give you a strategy for that. But if those contextual factors are not affecting your programming, then I'm going to, change the parameters of the program. So your program may change weekly or it may change almost never for 3-4 months. It depends on how you're responding to it. So I do weekly check-ins every week via WhatsApp. I do all your training footage feedback if you're doing training with me. I do all your video analysis of how you're executing movements. So that's sort of how I break down my coaching. I do it by aspects. If I'm taking over everything from A to Z for you, then that's going to be a higher rate than me just handling your training or just your diet.
Perfect. Does anybody have any other questions? Please speak now or forever hold your speech or piece or whatever it is. I've never been to any wedding. I'm meant to be the comedic relief. So yeah, this is actually a really good attendance. I do appreciate everybody who joined. The funny thing is that the maximum attendance that we had last time was 11, and the maximum that we had today was 30, and we managed to retain between 15 to 20 people. Thank you guys. This is going to happen weekly. Put it in your diaries, put it in your planners. If you potentially think that you might have a question throughout the week and feel like it's something you want to ask today, or ask next week, it doesn't make sense to ask it today, to ask next week, make sure to turn up, or DM Doc. And yeah, this is actually a great event. And like I said, the more you guys show the support towards Doc and these events, the more we're happy to run it. And please, once again, I'm going to spam it again. Support Doc on every platforms, MTO_coaching. And Doc, do you have anything to say to close this off? And I think that'll just be an hour on the dot, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So, if you guys have any questions, just write them down, fill them up for the Q&A session. I get a lot of them, and this is a way for me to make sure I don't miss it because I get so many messages and so many DMs. And truth be told, I'm 4 weeks out from a bodybuilding show. And if you guys know how bodybuilding preps are, like we are very, very irritable and very, very tired most of the day. So it's very rarely I get a chance to sit down and look at everything that I'm getting messaged and inboxed and being able to make it. That's why my social medias haven't been very active. One, because I'm in graduate school, but two, because I got a lot going on as far as my own training and my own clients that I have to look after. So this format gives me a chance to give back to you guys who support me in what I'm doing and being able to answer your questions and making sure I don't have a chance to maybe miss them as I would if they get lost into messages or DMs. So if you have any questions, just let me know. If you want to reach out to me about inquiring for coaching, just message me on my Instagram. I appreciate all of you guys for the support and the kind messages that you guys have been giving me for helping out with this stuff. Thank you so much. And we'll touch base next week.
Perfect. Thank you everybody for joining. I'm gonna drag you all to the general or whatever. Feel free to talk amongst yourself, have fun, and it's great having you all. See you all. Take care. Bye bye.
Hey, thank you, brother. You have a great day.
You too. Bye bye. Well, actually, I can't drag you all. If you guys want to talk to anybody or talk to me, go, join the general chat yourselves. I'll be sitting there just muted. Or the gaming chat.